far as war is concerned, we're at war with the communist half of the world.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
Drugs are menacing our society.
We can lift a whole generation away from the grip of a terrible menace.
Al-Qaeda is to terror what the mafia is to crime.
My administration is putting an end to the war on coal. Gonna have clean coal, really clean coal.
First of all, let's start with this. Where did this come from that you're not allowed to say, or you're insensitive if you say Merry Christmas? When did this start and where did it come from?
Well, it's Marxism.
Over the last few decades, the United States has declared a litany of wars. We've gone to war with Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, communism, drugs, terror. You'd think that by now, we would have taken on the most malignant forces in our society. So how are we combating the number one source of death? Is it terror? Drugs? Putin? Turns out, the best use of our time is the war on cardiovascular diseases, unintentional injuries, and diarrhea. As scary as murderers, terrorists, and drug lords may seem to be on the local news, it turns out that most people who meet an untimely demise do so in a way that's less flashy but more insidious. In the United States, there are a number of epidemic habits that are killing us slowly but surely. If we're going to have a war on something, why not focus on the simpler, more preventable killers in our lives? That's why, in the spirit of America, I'm proposing 4 new wars we should wage to save ourselves from ourselves. It's all part of one big mega battle in which we should all enlist, the war on risk. War number 1, the war on junk food. Sugary shakes, salty snacks, salacious slices, and scrumptious sweets are particularly insidious because, as my father once told me, you need food to live. So as hard as it may be to cut alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs cold turkey, it can be impossible with junk food based on your location and economic status. Many people live in food deserts where fresh fruits and vegetables are simply unavailable within a reasonable commute, forcing them to invest extra time and money for basic necessities, or to simply take the easier, cheaper, tastier processed option. Especially when your grocery store co-conspirator is a child, the unhealthy choice can be truly tempting indeed. Obesity is one of the leading causes of preventable death in the United States, and the United States is one of the most obese countries on planet Earth. But because junk food is not as inherently and immediately risky as drugs, cigarettes, or alcohol, regular people are far more likely to make the occasional lapse and eat something with no nutritional value and highly damaging properties. That can turn into regular habits, which can translate into many, many years being taken off of their lives. That's why we need a war on it. In some Western European countries, regulations are such that school lunches have far superior nutritional value to what is offered in the United States, as featured in Michael Moore's documentary, Where to Invade Next. We need to be better educated about what we're doing to our bodies when we succumb to the alluring siren song of the KFC Double Down. But barring that, we could use some extra help from regulations and taxes that de-incentivize these giant corporations from pumping us full of unadulterated nastiness. Of course, that sort of action can backfire, as with Michael Bloomberg's soda ban, which many argued was a tax that punished the poor rather than incentivized healthy choices. So a strategy of positive reinforcement may be more effective, with subsidies that would help make sure that healthy foods are A, available in the first place, and B, inexpensive. Finally, we may simply need a cultural shift about the role of eating in our society anyway. Food is so often portrayed as a reward for getting through another day in the miserable American existence, rather than a fuel that will give you the opportunity to be a part of another day in the miserable American existence. While it may be emotionally healthy to treat yourself every once in a while, if you get into the habit of eating a burger to decompress from a hard day of work, or drinking a Coke to get you through the day in the first place, that sort of behavior can add up to, well, not having yourself to treat, period. Which would be the biggest tragedy of all. Regular exercise over long periods of time can add years to your life, and since physical activity is something we have long been evolutionarily predisposed to take part in, that means sitting around doing nothing actually takes years off of our life expectancies. That's why war number 2 is the war on laziness. The 2016 election brought attention to the decreasing number of blue-collar jobs. While that had political and cultural implications, another consequence of that is that less Americans are spending their days up and moving around and being active. Simultaneously, the ubiquity of technology and the number of tasks which can be completed with just a computer have increased the number of jobs where you sit in one place all day staring at a screen. I cannot propose that we try to brute force bring back jobs that no longer need to exist. Instead, we have to find ways to supplement that active element of work life in our largely digital lives. Both our work lives and our free time have become centered around technology, particularly computers and smartphones. So if doing more physical work isn't an option, the main choices seem to be 1. Adding physical activity to our leisure time, or 2. Incorporating physical activity into our work lives. Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign focused on the former, specifically getting children to be keen to the idea of exercise. Just as with healthy eating, it seems instilling good exercise habits early on might be the best way to pay it forward for a healthier American future. On that note, if kids get recess, why shouldn't adults? Some workplaces do offer discounted gym memberships or have exercise facilities in the building. Barring those levels of resources, smaller workplaces can organize intramural sports teams, running clubs, or soul cycle sessions. But even something as simple as the standing desk can keep people more engaged and less physically complacent. An incremental problem can be solved with incremental actions. Of course, it's especially hard to get active when you're stuck inside a steel death trap for hours on end. Indeed, traffic accidents are also a significant source of preventable deaths, not to mention the accumulated stress, anxiety, and frustration that comes from the daily commute. War number 3 is the war on traffic. Sure, getting in a car accident can take years from your life, but even if you go your whole life without one, you'll still lose years of your life sitting in your vehicle waiting through miserably slow traffic, a particularly unpleasant way to spend one's life. Even a reasonable commute, say 1 hour round trip each day, could add up to over 500 full days of your lifetime stuck behind the wheel. So no matter how you slice it, traffic is taking lives, both immediately and gradually. But is it truly preventable? The American economy, especially in real America, has become absolutely beholden to our operating these harbingers of death and disillusionment. Many Americans must put our lives at risk to get to work every day, as this obnoxiously large country has spread people 10, 20, and 30 miles away from their place of work. Perhaps the most intuitive suggestion would be to de-sprawl the cities by encouraging people to move more centrally and investing in better public transportation, especially in cities like Houston where things are spread out within city limits already, not to mention the suburbs in every direction. But if we cannot eliminate the car, we can minimize its use or find ways to drive it that are less dangerous. To use an example from the war on laziness, if we're going to have more jobs that are mostly digital, why not encourage more people to work from home instead of risking their lives every day by braving the human and concrete elements? Or, if you must have people show up in person, stagger the starting and ending times of the day for different employees. There's no practical reason why everyone in a given area should have to show up at work by 9 and be gone by 5. And if we could have moderate traffic all day long instead of 2 devastating periods of rush hour every day, perhaps a decrease in accidents could follow thereafter. But of course, traffic accidents aren't just caused by the traffic itself. One of the broadest, most mysterious cases of death listed toward the top is unintentional injuries. Essentially, this encompasses all accidents unrelated to traffic. Broadly speaking, you can file these premature deaths under the categories of people not paying attention to their surroundings and people having inadequate physical reflexes. In other words, our final war, war number 4, should be a war on distraction. Look around you the next time you're in a busy area full of people. There's arguably nothing more dangerous to people than other people, and that dynamic is exacerbated when people aren't paying attention to where they're going. Scholars have speculated about the psychological impacts of our increasing reliance on technology. Is our investment in the digital world harming our connections with one another? How is child development affected by early interactions with screens? These questions are outside the scope of this video, but I can tell you one thing from personal experience. Our phone addiction could be most deadly when it comes to us not paying attention to where we're walking. Over 1,000 recorded injuries a year in the United States can be attributed to distracted walking incidents involving cell phones, and about 10% of pedestrian injuries that lead to a trip to the emergency room are due to distracted walking. Additionally, I already addressed traffic accidents in this video, but texting while driving is an epidemic rooted entirely in the problem of distraction. It doesn't seem to matter how important a task we're taking part in, there's always the potential that the buzz we just heard is somehow more important. How then to wage the war on distraction? Is it impractical to suggest that people simply turn their phones off or lock them up while commuting? One of the problems is that our notifications are intertwined with our navigation, with people placing their phones on their dashboard to serve as a GPS, only to have it right at their fingertips when they want to see who just liked their Instagram post. Let's assume that we will be unable to psychologically avail ourselves of our desire to check our phone while driving. Two potential solutions then arise. One, we could nip the distraction in the bud by implementing settings that prevent us from receiving notifications while using a navigational system. There are also some apps which will lock you out of particularly distracting applications when you need to focus. There already exist campaigns against texting while driving, but perhaps we should follow the lead of anti-alcohol campaigns and advocate for designated navigators. If your friend is holding your phone, you can't wreck your car while looking at your friend's spring break reflections. The other solution could be to give in entirely to distraction. Put self-driving cars on the fast track and let us scroll to our heart's content. This may be the eventual solution, but for now, holding distraction at bay seems to be the more cost-effective and practical choice. These wars may not be as sexy as the war on terror, the war on drugs, or even the war on Christmas. And that's because instead of blaming an external force for humanity's problems, the war on risk would turn its attention to our own personal incremental demons. Focus on the internal locus. Junk food, laziness, traffic, and distractions are not black and white issues that can be resolved through some unilateral crusade to eliminate them from planet Earth. And the truth is, terror and drugs aren't black and white either. We've created a lot of problems for ourselves by treating them as such. If we could just approach society's issues as different degrees of incremental risk, rather than pure forces of good or evil that should be lauded or obliterated, we might be able to extend our lifespans just long enough to die in actual wars.